I was not invited to my own wedding anniversary party because my parents wanted to rewrite history, and honestly, I'm still trying to understand what it means when people who taught you to tell the truth decide the truth is a decor choice. They can move it to a different shelf, put a lamp on it, and pretend that makes it kinda. I'm Eliza, 33, a documentary film editor who spends 10 hours a day compressing chaos into a sequence that breathes. I do rough cuts, fine cuts, lock cuts. I live in timelines and waveforms and make a living deciding which breath stays in and which blink can go. So when I say my parents tried to edit me out of my own life, I don't mean metaphorically. They literally produced a party about my marriage and didn't invite me because the version of us they prefer is the one with fewer brown relatives and photographs and more toasts that rhyme. It started with dust and eucalyptus. My parents keep sachets in every drawer like they're trying to scent memory into obedience. I was in their attic to wrestle with a moody boiler and found a box labeled Legacy in my mother's careful hand. Inside, swatches from my wedding table linens. I fought hard for that blush gray, the exact color of a good rain, proof sheets, place cards with calligraphy loops so dramatic they deserved SAG cards, and tucked beneath a ribbon, carbon copies of letters my mother had written to a friend that made my stomach go very still. We knew from the beginning he wasn't right for her, one said. But we did our duty. Another talked about the tasteful vows and then in parentheses, not ours. I read them cross-legged on the floorboards with the feeling I get during interviews when a subject contradicts themselves so serenely you realize you're going to spend weeks reconciling the irreconcilable. Then my cousin Liv texted a screenshot from my mother's social circle, which functions like a municipal government for holiday centerpieces. The invitation was pastel and self-satisfied. Join us as we celebrate 5 years of love. The date was our anniversary. The venue was the conservatory with the glass ceiling that photographs like old money. Host, Mr. and Mrs. Randolph Harding. My parents. There was a sepia-toned photo from my wedding, confetti falling, my husband Arun's head tipped toward mine, my own face conveniently turned away, the crop tight enough to erase my aunt in her electric sari and the little cousin who danced himself into a nap under the sweetheart table. No mention of me. No mention of Arun. The line "an intimate family evening" glittered like a warning. I called my mother while she was choosing avocados, which is when she's most likely to answer with her hands full of normal. I found the albums, I said. And I saw the invitation. She didn't gasp. She never gasps, gasp is for amateurs. Isn't it lovely, she said. We're putting that night in the right frame. With everything that's happened, it felt necessary. What's happened is I got married and stayed married, I said. What frame needs fixing? You know what I mean, she hummed. Not exactly the son-in-law we would have curated. The speeches, your father didn't get to say what he wanted. The photographer delivered too many candids. It's not the story of our family. It's my story, I said, which sounded childish in my mouth until I heard it and realized that was the point. Why wasn't I invited? You'd hate it, she said, which is her favorite way to rename someone else's discomfort as my taste. And it would make your father nervous if you objected. Let us have this. It's like community outreach. We're rewriting history in the good way. There is no good way to rewrite history when the living can still speak. There is only who benefits and who disappears. I hung up, went home to our small apartment where the kitchen pretends it's a hallway, and told Arun, who was grading midterms on the couch and taking breaks to scratch our dog behind the ears like he was tuning a radio. He stared at me for a long, quiet second, and then he did what he always does when he's furious in a way that can hurt you by accident. He started washing dishes as if soap suds could muffle wrath. Your mom texted me, he said, turning off the faucet. Yesterday. She said we were welcome to attend if we could promise not to make it about us. I thought it was one of her jokes I don't get. A party about our anniversary that we could attend if we promised not to make it about us. The math offended me. Who else is going? The usual, he said. Your parents' charity board. Carter. His mouth kinked around the name. Carter is my ex who functions like a recurring character the audience likes because he's rich. He cheated with a Pilates instructor in 2016 and told me he was experimenting with curiosity. And my parents still set a place for him at Christmas because he tells the kind of jokes that make donors open their wallets. I spent the next day doing what I'm good at. I built a timeline. In my edit software, I created a dummy project called Anniversary Cut and dragged in everything I had: screenshots, voicemails, letters from the attic, my mother's Instagram captions under photos from 2019, best night ever. Good taste, the RSVP list live scraped with a screenshot like a spy. I watched my parents' version of events become clear: a rehearsal dinner where the lights were too warm, an uncle's speech about love that mentions cricket becoming a little long, my aunt's sari distracting, the DJ uncertain of classics. Small edits. Small knives. The cumulative effect: a wedding closer to my mother's taste and further from our reality. I didn't want to go. I wanted to send a courier with a mirror and a note that said, "Look who's missing." Arun, who is better at making a point without becoming the point, said, "Maybe one of us should be there to witness." He wasn't telling me to go. He was telling me not to let them cut a version so clean nobody remembered to look for blood. We asked Liv to meet us at a cafe where the chairs wobble and the coffee hits like confession. She brought her laptop and the kind of righteous energy that only belongs to firstborn daughters who learned boundaries late and now swear by them. "Of course I'll help you," she said, pulling up the event website. "But you need a plan that isn't just, showing up and yelling." "I don't yell," I said primly. "You do something worse," Arun said dry. "You treat people like footage. You go quiet and then you cut them to pieces." I almost smiled because he wasn't wrong. "Fine," I said. Plan. Accept the welcome as if it were sincere. Show up as if we believed in our own existence. Bring our own archive, photos, vows, the video my cousin shot on her phone when my grandmother put haldi on Arun's forehead and everyone cried. Ask to speak once on the record. If denied, leave. Document. Name it. Refuse to have the fight alone in the car later. Take it into a room where truth is stubborn. The day of the party was the kind of crisp that convinces you money smells good. The conservatory has a glass ceiling that turns evening into theater. I wore the navy dress with pockets that feels like spine. Arun wore the suit he bought for a funeral and says makes him look like a lawyer who cares. Outside, heaters glowed under umbrellas like domestic stars. Inside, all kids did low self-esteem therapy just by existing. A string quartet played something vaguely triumphant. And there they were, my parents, the hosts. My mother in a dress the color of an apology people call classy, my father holding a drink he only orders when donors are watching. Her smile faltered when she saw us. "You came," she said, as if that proved something about my character. "You welcomed us," I said. "We accepted." "We're keeping it positive," she whispered, ushering us past the guest book that read, "Leave a memory of that magical night," as if memories were obedient. I wrote in tiny block letters. The dal makhni ran out because my uncle ate joy like it was an Olympic sport and we ordered more at midnight, which is also love. Inside, the party was a narrative machine. Projection screens with a slideshow of approved images, cropped and filtered to the tasteful beige that lives in furniture catalogs. A cake that looked like it tasted expensive until you ate it and discovered money has no butter. Place cards with my parents' names bigger than the event title. A program that said a celebration of love, taste, and tradition, and a schedule with speeches, my father, my mother, a special friend of the family, Carter, and a musical interlude. A host MIC sat on a stand like a weapon. I have never wanted a MIC more. Liv slid up next to me, sewing invisibility with a smile. "I got you the run of show," she whispered, handing me a folded printout. My mother's handwriting annotated the margins. Next to DJ set, she'd written "No Bollywood." Next to Toast from Uncle Sanjay, she'd crossed it out and written Carter instead. Carter, who could pronounce naan only recently. I felt something at the base of my skull. The place breath keeps its keys go tight. "Don't edit while you're angry," Arun murmured. "Remember your rule." "Then I'll be angry later," I said. "Tonight I will be accurate." The lights dimmed. The quartet stopped pretending. My father took the MIC. He talked about lineage, about ancestors, about standing on the shoulders of those who came before. He referenced a great-great-grandfather who built railways and did not mention who laid the track. He thanked my mother with the ease of a man who has been taught what gratitude is supposed to look like in public. He did not say our names. Carter followed with a joke about losing the girl but keeping the family, earning an R from women with well-moisturized hands. He lifted his glass toward us as if blessing, as if we had come to audition for forgiveness. I saw the donors watching my face the way people watch wildlife. Do not spook the animal, do not get bitten, maybe it will do something photogenic. I raised my hand. Not high. I'm not a volunteer in a school assembly. Just enough to be undeniable. May I? I called and the room turned. My mother froze like stagecraft. My father recovered with a host voice that does not suffer interruptions. We're keeping remarks to the program, he said, genial as a knife wrapped in linen. Then consider this the program, I said, walking to the MIC before anyone could decide I'd been denied it. The quartet made the sound people make when they see a wave. I took the MIC because if there is one thing I've learned in rooms where people try to narrate you into compliance, it's to pick up the tool first. Hi, I said, and somehow it came out like a greeting at a dinner you paid for. I'm Eliza. 33. Documentary editor. The woman who got married 5 years ago on the day you've all gathered to celebrate. A ripple, discomfort, laughter, the tiny gasp that would satisfy my mother if she weren't busy calculating optics. I have learned a few things about editing, I went on. One is that you can cut a blink and make someone look decisive. 2 is that you can crop a photo and pretend the aunt in the turquoise sari wasn't there. 3 is that when you take out the parts that make you uncomfortable, you don't get truth, you get propaganda with nice lighting. I turned and looked up at the slide of Arun and me cropped to confetti and cheeks. I married this man, I said. He is of a different culture than mine in ways that make my mother call linens complicated. He is also kind and excellent at taxes, none of which is in the slideshow. A laugh rolled through the left side of the room, the dangerous kind that can be used against you or with you. I kept going because the only way out was through. My parents love me. I love them. And they are also people. People who decided to host a party about our anniversary and not invite us, because the story is easier without the people inside it. I heard my mother inhale like a cymbal. They call it rewriting history. I call it grief-wearing gloss. Carter had the decency to look at his shoes. My father had the courage to look at me. He was embarrassed, which is a start if you're brave enough to follow it to apology. Eliza, he said, that tone honey with a hinge. Let's keep it honest, I finished. Yes. I told one story. Not a monologue, not a viral TED Talk. Just a memory with no cutaways. The haldi ceremony in our kitchen, the way my grandmother laughed when the turmeric stained her own hands, the way my mother tried to wipe it off the table as if joy were a spill, the way at midnight our neighbor sent a tray of samosas because she smelled happiness. I described my father crying while he ironed his shirt alone because he didn't know how to ask anyone for help, even though he wanted to be told what to do, especially by me. I said my husband's name out loud and the room changed temperature. I spoke about my aunt's sari in electric blue, the song my cousin started and everyone knew the chorus to even if they didn't have the words, the auntie who corrected our steps and my mother who laughed then and dances smaller now. I didn't accuse. I narrated. Documentary in a dress. When I was finished, I did the most subversive thing I know. I thanked my parents for paying the caterer 5 years ago, for making sure the bar was open, for telling me I could wear flats and did not need to bleed for tradition. I said I loved them because it was true and because saying it out loud in public made it harder for anyone to accuse me of cruelty as a strategy. Then I handed the MIC back and left with Arun, past the guest book and the orchids and the looks that ranged from admiration to discomfort to conspiracy. Liv texted a string of swords and hearts as we walked out into air that hadn't been told what to think yet. In the car, nothing exploded. We didn't rehash. Arun reached over and put his hand on my knee and I leaned into the heater vent and the dog sneezed in the back like a period at the end of a long run-on sentence. My phone lit up with messages. Proud, are you okay? Your mom is going to kill me for sending you the invite. Can we get dumplings? I ignored all of them and told Arun the only thing I knew for sure. I don't want to spend my life asking rooms for permission to exist. The fallout was theatrical and also small. My mother left a voicemail with the word betrayal in it 3 times and the phrase our donors twice. My father emailed me an apology that read like a press release and then an hour later texted call me with a period, which is his version of crying. We called. He said, I'm sorry I let it happen. He did not say I did it, but we were moving. He said, your mother wanted to correct the record. I said, so do I. We sat in that mutual project for a minute and then he said, I miss you. And I told him about the dog chasing a piece of ice across our kitchen like it was an enemy troop. My mother and I went cold for a week, then tepid, then coffee hot. She has been the narrator my whole life. It was painful to watch her realize the book could be amended by the person inside it. We met at a diner because the coffee is bad and humility is easier when the table is sticky. I brought her a printed transcript of what I'd said. My editor's brain knows paper calms people who need proof. She read it with her lips moving like a child learning to read, which in a way she was. I wanted the good parts, she said finally. You wanted the true parts. I wanted both, I said gently. You can't get good by deleting people. She cried quietly. It is always startling when your mother becomes a woman in front of you, when the scaffolding falls and you see how much she has been holding and how clumsily, and you decide not to punish her for arms that shake. I felt left behind, she confessed. You married into a whole other ecosystem. I wanted the room to still be mine. Then say that, I said, because if editing has taught me anything, it's that the right sentence can save a scene. Don't pretend the story changed. Say you're lonely. Invite us to dinner. Learn the names of the spices without making jokes. And the donors. She half smiled. I had to respect the steadfastness of her priorities. Invite them to taste, I said. Not to judge. We made rules. Not fancy ones. Small, domestic rules that monumentally reroute how a family moves. She wouldn't post archive photos without asking. She would learn to pronounce Arun like the sun coming up, not like an errand. She would stop inviting Carter to holidays. I would stop bringing my work voice to brunch. She would ask me to tell a story in rooms instead of telling it for me, and I would show up prepared to speak when asked. We shook on it like a treaty and then we both laughed because this was not war and also it was. At home, I did a thing that felt like growing the second half of a backbone. I asked Arun to tell me if I had ever edited him in public without his permission. He thought for a long moment and then said, At your dad's birthday, you told the story about me crying at our first apartment like it was funny. It was funny later. It wasn't then. I apologized. We made our own rule. We don't turn one another into anecdotes unless the other person has gotten paid in laughter first. Life did not become a montage. My mother slipped twice. Once she posted a throwback of me and Carter at prom with the caption Imagine, which she took down after exactly 6 minutes and left up long enough for Aunt Maureen to comment always thought so. Once she referred to our haldi as that turmeric thing in front of her bridge club, then called me to ask for the word and practiced it with the relentless intensity she once applied to Pilates. Haldi, haldi, haldi. Progress isn't pretty. It rarely trends. We made a new anniversary ritual because I refused to let the conservatory hijack the date. The next year we hosted what we called, just to ourselves, the director's cut. We invited the people whose names never make it to programs. The neighbor who sent samosas, the friend who drove my grandmother home when her feet hurt, the coworker who smuggled an extension cord to our DJ when the outlet died. We printed candid photos on cheap paper and clipped them to string across our living room like a laundromat for joy. We put out bowls of snacks that look like love in every language. Chevda, pretzels, grapes, pitta, hummus, a cake from the grocery store because grocery store frosting is the color of honesty. My mother came. She brought an apple tart and said haldi correctly in a sentence about stains and, unlike the year before, did not try to wipe at joy like it was a spill. At some point in the evening the music shifted, someone found an old playlist and the tiny speaker insisted on having a big night, and my father danced with my grandmother who is steadier than he is where it counts. My mother joined, small at first. She is used to being watched when she performs. She is less used to being witnessed when she learns. She let my aunt place her hands and correct her steps and did not make a joke of it to save face. I watched the edges of the room soften. I watched the cut change in front of me, not because I forced it, but because I refused to leave the timeline to people whose only tool is crop. Work bled into this in the way everything good in my life blurs. I pitched a short doc called Director's Cut, about families trying to reframe events that happened in the age of ubiquitous cameras. Consent and storytelling became my North Star. We filmed a retired history teacher who corrects his memoir at the dinner table, a queer couple whose parents throw a recommitment party after once refusing to attend their wedding, and yes, my mother sitting in a chair by the window reading the paragraph she wrote that begins, "I love my daughter enough to be embarrassed on camera," and ends, "I wanted a room I could control, but rooms are better when you learn the steps you don't know." When we premiered it at a tiny festival, she wore a dress that made her look like a good decision and cried in the dark beside me in a way that felt like a second baptism. She'll never stop wanting a room to be beautiful. I hope she never does. Beauty isn't the enemy of truth, it's only a problem when it's used to hide bodies. She still hosts, and sometimes she still uses words like tasteful the way other people use laws. But now there's a space on her mantle for a photo from the Haldi, not because it photographs well but because it happened and therefore belongs. There's a magnet on her fridge that says "Ask First," in a font she would never have chosen but keeps because I gave it to her with a grin, and she is practicing having her refrigerator tell on her. When people ask incredulously if I forgave my parents for rewriting, I say forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a schedule. We keep it like we keep appointments. Some weeks we make it, some weeks we reschedule, and now at least we put it on the calendar. If you're expecting a dramatic reconciliation scene where a string quartet swells and everyone claps, I don't have that. I have text threads where my mother sends me a photo she wants to post and asks, "Okay?" I have dinners where my father says, "Tell that story," and then shuts up. I have a husband who looks at me across the table like the camera is finally on the right subject. Every anniversary now, I send my parents a short email that reads like a log note from the edit bay. 5 years. Love intact. Truth intact. New cut approved. My mother replies with too many exclamation points. My father replies with a thumbs up emoji followed by the sentence, "Proud of you," which is shorthand for the longer, heavier sentences he cannot yet lift. We go to dinner with friends who clap when we arrive because they are happy we exist, not because they expect us to perform, and we come home early and sit on the floor and eat leftover cake with our hands. The dog looks offended by our joy and then throws his whole body into it, because dogs know the correct response to a party is always yes. If you've made it this far and you're waiting for a moral, here's the closest I've got: learned in rooms with humming hard drives and in a conservatory with orchids trying to be op-eds. If someone invites people to celebrate your life and forgets to invite you, show up with your whole inconvenient self and speak like you mean you were there. Tell one true story out loud, even if your voice shakes and the lighting is unflattering. Ask for the MIC. If they refuse you, leave and build your own room with worse chairs and better air. Keep receipts without letting them salt your meals. And when the ones who hurt you try again in smaller ways, notice the difference, honor the inches, and correct the cut without cruelty where you can. Sometimes late when our apartment is quiet and the dog is doing his nightly dream chase, I open the project file called Anniversary Cut and watch the first minute, the one where my mother says on camera, "I wanted the room to be mine," and then looks up and with the smallest, bravest smile adds, "It isn't. It's ours." I hit spacebar. The piece plays. My breath starts to match the rhythm of a life I didn't surrender the editing rights to. And I think, not with vengeance but with a relief that tastes like buttercream, they tried to crop me. I learned to hold the frame.